Andy, buddy, you got to stop trying to call me. I appreciate it.
Nailed it.
You saved our lives. You saved our bacon.
You really did, man. Thank you so much. So we just had some audio issues up here.
3 minutes into the cast, we don't notice that this is what we get for trying to rush in at the 11th hour.
Right? They probably couldn't even hear the song in the beginning. They didn't even have like a nice jam, like a nice beat.
Does that mean we get to do a do-over?
I would just jam it. Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Bacon saved. Thanks, Tech4. He's here. We can start the cast.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey.
Well, hey, welcome everybody. Finally, for the second time, the first time you didn't hear it, but for the second time, welcome to the SnapCast podcast with your hosts, Brad O'Brien and Mike Cooley, where we talk about Magic the Gathering and Magic-related things. If this is your first time stumbling upon us on the internet and you're just curious, you're like, well, what the hell are these two goofy-looking dudes doing? We're going to be talking about Magic. We're geared towards the casual Magic player with a competitive interest in MTG finance. If you like buying, selling, trading Magic cards, this is the place for you. And I'll tell you, we were just joking about this. I feel so bad you guys didn't get to hear this. We just had a nice little banter.
We did. We blew the best part of the cast already. And nobody could hear it.
Blew it. You guys couldn't even hear it. But we were talking about, because I'm not sure how many retail stock investors we have out there that listen to the cast, but Brad and I are your typical, I would say retail stock investors getting beat up by the big guys, getting beat up by the hedge funds recently. And we were kind of joking. We were like, dude, they had said even last year that like one of the best things you could have invested in the last 5 years was Magic cards, like cardboard.
Yeah, cardboard beat out the stock market basically every year since 1995.
It's been ridiculous, man. So it's kind of crazy when you think about that. Like when you think about the little suggestions that in the banter and the talks that we have each week, it's kind of crazy when you think about it in the long run. Like
we're not that stupid.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Like you could be listening to some other, finance podcasts on YouTube. I listen to, Stock Mo. I used to talk this guy up. I still like him. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a smart guy. But I'm happy I stopped listening to him after a while with his, he was pushing like the EV market. And it's a really good market. It's really great. It just blew up too quick. Like, you know what I mean? And he was still talking it up even on its way down, like, 40, 50%. He should have been saying, hey, cut your losses. Like, sell these stocks, wait for it, just be honest. Like, just because you're on a horse don't mean you gotta stay on it when it's jumping over a bridge. You know what I mean? Like,
you don't have to die on it.
You don't have to die on it. That's right, man.
Well, so like Tech4 put in the chat, put it all in dog money. If you're somebody that follows MTG Remy on YouTube or Facebook, he just put out some great advice that would have been good a month ago. Oh man, that would have made some millionaires months ago. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So we're kind of like the equivalent of that. I don't know if doggy coin is, but you get our point. We like to talk about the opportunities to buy, sell, trade Magic cards, and also some of the things we're going to talk about today. Just the weird stuff and the news that goes on in the Magic the Gathering community. Yeah, because absolutely.
Sometimes it can really affect things. It can affect maybe card prices. Maybe it can affect, the interest in the game in general. All of which, believe it or not, can all tie back to what we talk about every week. So we've got some cool things on the roster for today.
Right. And we've got this, Magic is in this weird situation right now where it's all press is good press, like even bad press is good press.
Yep.
There's a bunch of people that are crying how, what WotC's done this week to kill Magic is basically saying they've put an end-of-life clause now on the Magic Pro League. And at the same time, in big culture and in bigger YouTube channels like the Game Nights program, they're about to have a show featuring Post Malone, who my biggest... So how I know Post Malone? He did an all Nirvana jam with a bunch of his friends in the quarantine. And it was awesome.
You didn't know him from Rockstar before that?
What's Rockstar?
Oh my gosh, that was the shit. That in my opinion, that was like what got hit. That was the big thing for Post Malone.
Was that like an album? Or
it was
a
song. It was a song with 21 Savage, where he's just like talking about being a rock star and shit. Fucking hoes. I don't know, the regular stuff they talk about in rap songs.
I was just going to say, is it a rap?
Yeah, it's like they're talking about fucking hoes and popping pillies and being rock stars. I mean, that's
what the song
he
was
just
about.
did it to, very unique style into a very new beat. It was awesome. I'm not going to lie. I jammed that song in my car for months. I still do. I listen to it every day, actually. I'm not going to lie to you guys here on the cast. It's a good song. But he's going to be on, what is it, Commander?
It's called Game Nights.
Game Nights.
Knights.
I see.
Like Knights.
Yeah.
And it's Josh Lee Kwai and Jimmy Wong. And, I mean, those guys do an awesome Commander-focused podcast. And they both work in Hollywood. They do high production value, great editing, graphics, the whole nine. It's actually the most fun you can have watching 4 other people play Commander that isn't just a camera over the table.
That's awesome.
They do player interviews, they do play-by-plays with graphics that really tell you how damage is stacking and all this. They do a phenomenal job.
That's cool.
But they also get tons of views.
Wow.
And so this thing with, I mean, WotC's smart. And in this whole conversation about ending the Magic Pro League, they said 10% or less of our market is invested in sanctioned tournaments. So 90% of our sales are to people that are not playing F&M or going to a GP or give a crap about who's gold, silver, platinum, none of that stuff. They're not trying to make a living at Magic. They want to pick up some packs at Wally World and crack them on the kitchen table and then forget about Magic again until next Friday when their friends come over.
Yeah.
And so the news that they're wrapping up the Pro League in the Magic world for us unfranchised folks is like, whoa. They're not going to have, like, they've always had a professional Magic scene.
Yeah.
They've always had some sort, like, organized play has been a huge part of the game, but they're going to get way more press from Post Malone being on a YouTube channel that's not even theirs.
Yeah. So, I mean, within this short conversation, there's like 2 big things we can talk about, right? That like I think they paint the bigger picture. They suggest something larger for all of the little Magic cards that we collect, right? And the potential value of them over time. If you can understand the things that we talk about each week, the reprints, the risks with each cards, the short-term, the long-term cards, those sorts of things. There's 2 big topics in there. Let's dive into the first one, and that is the MPL being SOL, which you so gallantly put in the title. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant.
Thank you.
So Magic Pro League no longer going to be a thing. As Brad said, they less than 10% of their players actually play Table Talk, Magic, and sanctioned tournaments.
Sanctioned tournaments, yeah.
Yeah. So,
which a bunch of people were like, how do they even know that? But, I mean, it's their business.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got to know how many products that they're selling and how many people show up to events.
Well, you could also probably figure it out if you just look at unique credit card numbers and debit card numbers that buy your product in some way versus how many people show up to sanctioned tournaments. You know what I mean? It's because that kind of encompasses a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
it's possible. I don't know that they have access to that data because WotC doesn't sell cards directly.
That's
true.
So
they don't get that purchasing information. A lot of people thought it would have been a great idea if your DCI number were linked to your purchases. So then WotC would get your buying information. Now they're getting a lot of buying information with the secret layers. But one of the things that Tech4 Andy put in the chat that makes a lot of sense is there is a hope that this means that they're going to go back to something like we used to have, which is you qualify for a tournament by winning a smaller tournament.
Ooh.
So you have your store tournaments, and then you go up to something like a PPTQ, and then a PTQ, and then
wow,
whatever the Pro Tour is.
There used to be some mad grinders doing that stuff, man. Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to incentivize newer players, any players that are out there, not just the top ones, but any players who are out there, by giving some sort of financial reward for being good at the game. I mean, isn't that how any game nowadays really blows up?
Well, so the problem is with Magic, because Magic's system is inherently, it's based on variance. You know, the way you shuffle your mana source or your resources is different from a Hearthstone or something like that, where you have resources every turn. So no matter how good you are, I mean, except for maybe the god level players like Kai Buddha and John Finkel, but even those guys, they were that good then.
Right.
Before YouTube and MTG Goldfish and Reddit and all of that stuff. They were great at the game because they had a leg up on everybody.
Right.
Now the information is so available, I don't think that they could go and win every tournament every weekend back to back and make enough to live on. And that's the thing that even the previous pro system did was, okay, Brad Nelson, you're a great player, or LSV, you're, probably a lock for the Hall of Fame at some point if the Hall of Fame still existed.
Yep.
But you can't win enough playing a GP every weekend to live. So this can only ever be a hobby. Unless you supplement with other things. So like he creates content and does some coverage work and all of this stuff. Like he does several other things. That's LSV. But the dream for somebody to just literally be able to go and play tournaments every weekend and make enough money is nearly impossible.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't say that I disagree with Wizards of the Coast's decision here. Like, it's just not a very sustainable thing because the game is always going to change, right? And what are you going to do someday when these players are like 60, 70 years old? You're going to be like, well, now hiring for a new world champion of Magic. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure people will surface in the meantime, but it's like you sort of turned it into like the round table of the elite few, when it's probably a better style to encourage and to say literally anybody can do this. Literally anybody, you could start playing Magic tomorrow, and if you got good enough or lucky enough, you could be at the table getting paid, in some of these big tournaments. I kind of like it, and also it's like you said, there's other ways to supplement your income when it comes to, this game. Especially, like, look at what Jim Davis did. I can really respect this guy because I used to see him grinding.
Because you beat him at a game of Magic?
I beat him one game. I don't think I ever beat him in a match. But, like, we played tabletop before, Jim Davis and I, back before he was famous. I still remember, you guys know what Jim Davis looks like. He's a very, I'm not going to say a weird-looking guy. He's just a very unique-looking guy.
Distinct.
He has like those eyes that kind of like, if you see him in person, they kind of like, he's not really looking at you. He's like looking around you, and like, you're like, what the hell are you looking at? Am I showing you some of my cards? What's going on? But he's like surveying. Doing? But his eyes are like always wide, and he's always paying attention. It's like, either way, I just remembered the guy. But like what he did before this was even a thing, I don't think he probably wasn't getting paid by Wizards or anything like that. But what he did was he said, okay, I've won a few SCG tours. I've built up a name for myself. And he did what just about any content creator out there does when they have a name for themselves on something. He went out there and streamed it. He went out there and made content for people because that's typically the way people do it nowadays. Like, the game is kind of changing, Well, you
don't have to win when you're streaming to get paid.
Exactly.
And where it's hard for anybody, even the best in the world, to have a better than 50% win rate, you're absolutely right. That's the way to do it. But they did used to supplement like travel and they'd give you something for showing up. You know, so there were things called appearance fees. If you were a Platinum Pro, you got a couple of buys and an appearance fee. And then even if you didn't cash the tournament, you didn't lose money for going. All of that stuff's going away. You show up, you play, you win, great.
Yep.
Awesome. Earlier this year, Channel Fireball events ceased to exist, and they had gotten the sole rights to put on Grand Prix.
Really?
Yeah. They were the only company that could do Grand Prix. And then during the pandemic, they basically went belly up and said no. And what I think happened was during the pandemic, somebody at WotC said, hey, we're not going to be supporting play like this in 2 years. And they probably pulled the plug on it because, one, they were losing money this whole year. And WotC isn't going to be doing it after 2022.
Right.
So it is going to come down to like the SCG Tour and other tournament organizers, which again, like Andy said, you know, if we go back to something like the prior system and you just have these other organizers throwing tournaments that if you spike and do well, you'll make money and you'll get your name, the game goes on.
Yeah.
It's just WotC's saying we're not going to fund that side of the Magic. We're going to spend the money on ways like you said, Mr. Beast. We're going to put 50 grand towards Mr. Beast to bring people to the game that have never heard about it, or people that are just gamers that don't know about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a better use of your money, right? Like, I mean, my first question when Brad told me this was like, you know, he says, oh, people aren't going to be able to make a living playing Magic from Wizards of the Coast anymore. And I was like, how many people were even doing that? Like in my head, I'm like, it's like 8 to 10 people, maybe. No, apparently it was like 64 people, right? But when you put it in terms like that, it really makes sense, because if they're making, let's say you're paying them 50 to 75 grand a year in benefits, in, you know, compensation for travel, in their actual pay, all of this. You multiply that, let's say 50 grand by 64, right? That is quite a bit of money, right? And with that, you can literally do what they just did. They can reach out to some of the biggest content creators or influencers on the planet, and say, hey, Mr. Beast, instead of us paying 64 people $50,000 a year, how about we pay you $100,000 for one appearance to, you know, bring some attention to Magic the Gathering? And that in turn, even though, you know, you might think, oh, if you're like the classic, they took our gerbs part of Facebook, you're like, 64 people aren't getting paid by Wizards of the Coast for playing a card game anymore. But on the other hand, the company is making a very smart decision, because you're getting in front of Mr. Beast's audience now.
Yeah.
And like, that is millions of people that might not have even, I don't even know if there are millions of people that haven't heard about Magic, but you know what I mean? Like millions of people that might not have thought of playing Magic before, that had now seen Mr. Beast playing it, and they're like, wow, this is cool. You know, it's like those nerdy habits that you don't got to hide from your girlfriend anymore. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, this is cool. Mr. Beast is doing it.
Mike asked me to put that in the show notes on YouTube, that, you know, you might not have to hide this from your girlfriend anymore, because we sort of have come full circle with this conversation now, where we're talking about Post Malone, who's one of the most popular music artists in the world, I guess. You know, me showing my ignorance. But
definitely in recent history.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, like currently.
Yeah.
And when people hear Magic and Post Malone, people that have never heard of Magic but know Post Malone perk their heads up. And then, you know, there were people in the Reddit threads on the MTG Finance Reddit community were like, oh, yo, did you hear Post Malone just went into a shop and dropped $5 grand on cards for his deck to play on game nights? And of course, you had a bunch of trolls that were like, I spent more than $5 grand this month on Magic cards. Nobody's writing about me in the paper.
Bunch of fucking crybabies out there, dude. Everywhere you go. It happened with that Mr. Beast thing, too. They were just like, oh, Mr. Beast, you know, if I didn't know I was playing him, and it would have been nice if you streamed it. It would have been nice if we know we could have played Messi. Shut up, dude. Like, this ain't your company. This ain't your damn game. If you want to play Mr. Beast, just, even if you knew about it, the odds of you playing him, this one person in Magic Arena, was so low. Like, just shut up. Crybabies everywhere, dude. They're everywhere you go. But then with this Post Malone thing too, like, he drops $5,000 on Magic cards, and this is a really good thing, which we'll get to in a second. Like, it's so good to see headlines like this, right? Yeah. But like, you still see crybabies in this sense. Oh, I spent $5,000 on my deck and blah blah blah. And no, it didn't make the paper. It's just like, yeah, you spent $5,000 over 10 years. You friggin' crybaby. Post Malone just walked into your local game store and bought $5,000 worth of cards in one shot. Like, you know what I mean? It's just how it is. And it's a good thing because, first of all, it brings that exposure that we're talking about to Magic the Gathering, right? Like, people say, wow, Post Malone plays this game? It can't be that bad. Like we kind of joked about. I no longer have to hide my nerdy habit from my girlfriend because Post Malone plays.
I mean, clearly it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's some notable people playing it. But here's the other thing too, right? People who might not even know about Magic the Gathering, right? When they hear that some big celebrity went into a friggin' local game store and dropped $5,000 on Magic cards, someone who was not convinced about the value of Magic cards suddenly is. It almost doesn't matter what the hell he bought for $5,000. He could have bought $5,000 worth of basic lands for all anybody knows. But the fact that he spent money, that much money, and saw the value in it, it's like, it's a big, big thing, I think, for the community in general and for people like us who every week we're looking at these deals to get. Like, oh, this card dropped because of a reprint. Like, and I know the value of it. Well, let's get this card now. Or, this is my swan song every friggin' week, it seems, is like, buy cards from the reserved lists.
Nobody's ever heard you say that.
No one's ever heard me. But it's like, but those are the cards right there. Those reserved list cards. If you didn't know shit about Magic the Gathering, right? And you heard a couple of famous people dropping thousands of dollars buying these cards, and you're just like, all right, well, maybe I ought to buy some of those and just see where it goes. If you are a semi-educated person and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do a little bit of research. Oh, this card's worth the most. Let me buy this. Or this card is worth, hundreds of dollars. This will up my Magic the Gathering status right here. I mean, that's what, what's his face did. The guy that tried to, Martin Shkreli. It's what that guy did. It's what that guy did. He didn't know shit about the game. He just knew, hey, I'm a dumb monkey with a ton of money, and I heard there's some value in this game. Let me go try to buy all of the Black Lotuses out there. Like, you know what I mean? That's legit what he tried to do. And I think the more things that happen like this, when you see, big names just dropping $5,000 on Magic, yeah, that's the shit that happens. Like, you get people that don't know anything about it that have a shit ton of money that just say, yeah, give me these cards. Let me just buy some of these and see where it goes.
If there's any traction ever on the Magic the Gathering TV show that is constantly being talked about, being in production for Netflix, like, things like that all stack up into just Magic is just always on the cusp of being Band-Aids. It's always on the cusp of being Kleenex, where everybody knows what it is. Even now, more so than 5 or 10 years ago, when I tell people, oh, I play Magic the Gathering, or, next level nerd them, and I'm like, I actually do a weekly podcast about Magic the Gathering finance and the secondary market bullcrap. Yeah, people are like, everyone, more often than not now, people are like, oh yeah, I know that. My son played that.
Oh, that's crazy.
Oh, I played that when I was in high school.
Yeah.
People that are like,
just
40 years old. So I think that we are, even with the bubble sort of bursting of the stimuluses have run out, things are going back to normal. I think that we're going to see another renaissance of cards as paper play resumes. and more people get an interest in the game.
And the more that this type of stuff starts happening, like, when famous people make the news for something Magic the Gathering related, this is where the value of your cards goes up. Yep. Like it's just the fact that you have stock in the game at that point. It's like Elon Musk buying Bitcoin. Like, if you had Bitcoin, you loved that because
he was
spiked it through the roof.
An influencer.
Exactly. Like, it's sort of, it's the same thing. So it's like the classic people who've been playing this for a while, you and I, the people who listen to this podcast, buckle up, because I think there's a big revolution coming. But also along those same lines, if there's any reserve list cards that you've had your eyes on that you're like, oh, maybe I should get that, it's just out of my price range, perhaps now would be. It's never gonna be in your price range. It's never gonna be in it, right? Exactly. Perhaps now is the time to be like, okay, yeah, Gaia's Cradle for $800. Well, that sucks, but guess what? In a year, in 5 years, when they're still saying, hey, that cardboard game that blew up and all the celebrities started playing it, and Christ, one of the best investments you could have made was that cardboard game back then, when when the FANG was going to the floor, when all of this stock market shit was happening. You should have just put your money into the reserve list cards. Like, I can almost guarantee you, the more attention that this gets, the more that's going to happen in the next 5 years. When your reserve list cards go up, it's like, told you so. Told you so.
Tech 4 in the chat with the heat. First, he says, Cooley's too rich for Wizards of the Coast. He's getting those big Activision Blizzard dollars. and Post Malone spent his stimmy money on MTG just like the rest of us. But really, with the price of gas right now, you're probably better off buying Gaia's Cradles. I saw somebody say the other day that if you really want to flaunt your wealth in this economy, you fill up your four-wheeler with expensive gas, drive out to your favorite dirt pit, fire off a couple of rounds of 9 into a piece of plywood for no reason.
Shit we used to do growing up.
Things you do for fun. You put a couple of boxes of 9mm into a sheet of plywood down the trail on your four-wheeler that gets 2 miles a gallon to the tank.
It's so ridiculous, dude.
I'm telling you, I have 2 Snap This Ups this week, and they're both from the same set. They're not reserve list cards. I'm suggesting you look at the Ikoria cards Drannith Magistrate and Luminous Broodmoth. And they're about, I'm estimating right now, I think I looked at them earlier, and they were $6 and $10 respectively. Awesome white cards, playable in EDH, playable in Standard, and they'll still be in Standard for a while, playable in Pioneer, and potentially playable in Modern. And especially as we've been talking the last week about, and earlier, about white getting stronger cards, talking about Sanctum Prelate and that sort of stuff, you're going to want to pick up these white cards. And especially Luminous Broodmoth being a mythic, it's probably not going to get any cheaper because it's, again, and I know that I repeat myself at the risk of repeating myself. Paper card prices right now are not predicated on paper play.
Wow, all the alliteration in that statement, I'm very impressed.
Thank you. I worked hard at it.
That was like you thought of it or something, but I know you didn't. I know that was freestyle. That was the best spoken word I've heard, and it just tickled my ears to hear it. And it was very insightful.
All you had to do was call me a turd there. You were like, the best spoken word I've heard, you turd.
Yeah, man. So I think those are good picks, man. Really, we're at such a clutch time with everything about to open back up. It's like, if you have something, it's like you can't miss if you get a good deal on a card right now. I will say this without having checked the price recently. But maybe we could while we've got all of our tools and resources up here. Check the price of Sarah's Sanctum.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's
let's not get too wild. But okay.
So I have two opposite ends snap this up. So, okay, yeah, it's a 10% higher since I last looked at it. But the last time I looked at Sarah's Sanctum, it was a little over $200. This is a land card. It is on the reserved list. Speaking of Gaia's Cradle, talking about legendary cards such as, of these lands that are on the reserved list, which typically seem to go up in price way more than anything else. This card right here, I don't think is going to be, I don't think it's going down anytime soon. I was kicking myself when the pandemic hit. Mind you, you want a comparison to like the stock market and what have you. In the pandemic, when everything crashed, right? And, even the reserve list cards, we were like, wow, these aren't really crashing that much, not as much as expected anyway. Sarah's Sanctum was like $80. This was less than a year ago. It was $80. So you're talking a 300+% return on this card. On a card that cannot be reprinted. They cannot do special versions of this. And with all of the recent focus around enchantments, them getting creative with cards like Urza's Saga that they're bringing out.
Which is a land and an enchantment and a saga.
And an enchantment. Like, this land right here is just insane. So it gives you a white mana for each enchantment you control. I mean, people know about this card. This is a legendary card right here. Not just in card type, but in reputation. This card is legendary.
I see that you were like beating me to the punch there. The only thing that I will say about this, and obviously it is not a replacement, but with Gaia's Cradle, they replaced it sort of with Growing Rights of Itlamok. I
laugh every time somebody plays that. And they say, poor man's Gaia's Cradle. I'm just like, I'm going to abrupt decay that. Like, I'm going to hit it with shit that can't hit Gaia's Cradle. They can never reprint it in form or function.
They can't. But when that flips on the backside, it taps for a green. Or a green for each creature you control. So it makes mana anyway.
Yep.
I'm just saying, yes, Sarah's Sanctum is a great card. If you've got the $260 to pick one up, you're never going to get it cheaper. I don't know, how many of our listeners are high rollers that are going to pick up 10 of these to hopefully flip for 500 in a year?
Nah, you wouldn't. This isn't a card that I would suggest picking up to flip. This is the type of card that I can guarantee you someday you will want it. Like, you're going to have a deck with all of the creative shit that they're doing with enchantments. Someday you're going to be like, man, with all of these crazy free enchantments that I can drop, how long is it going to be before they have print a 0-drop enchantment like they do with, 0-drop artifacts or something? And suddenly this card is just going to keep climbing. And you're going to be like, man, I really wish I'd have got that when it was $230. You know what I mean? Again, it can't be reprinted. It's only going up in price. The supply and demand, like the supply is getting less, the demand will continue to get higher. It's an age-old play. And I would say right now, honestly, even though this has gone up 300% in a year, I still think it's under what it's actually worth. Like, with its actual rarity and with Wizards of the Coast current focus on enchantments and making those more viable and adding them randomly to card types.
All right, for the sake of expediency, because I am going to have to take off a little early tonight, why don't you tell folks about your last pick?
Last pick on the other side of the spectrum. On the if you're just trying to throw a few bucks here and there, if you do want to try to flip a card in about a couple of years, and you want to overbuy something, make an investment, I would highly suggest this version that we're showing up on screen here of Abundant Harvest. It's the only one out there right now. I take that back. They have an English and they have a Japanese version of this. Get the English version. I don't care. Get the Japanese. Get one of these cool bordered extended art versions. You can get them for like $150 right now. And this is what everybody says. They say, oh, this is going to be in Modern Horizons. This is going to be in Modern Horizons. It's going to be in Modern Horizons with like a regular ass border and like as a common or uncommon. Hell, I don't even care if it's a rare. Like, it's going to have a regular ass border on it.
Yeah.
And it's still going to be used. Like, this is already making a very large appearance in Modern. And this will be one of, if not the coolest versions of it.
And so one of the other things that I will say is it is very rare that like this is almost like a time shifted card. It hasn't been printed in a booster set yet, technically. Like the set that it's supposed to be in hasn't even been released.
Yep.
So this copy, like you said, I 100% agree with this card. I think it is very playable. It doesn't exist in any other form right now. Is not likely to be a rare. This is probably an uncommon in Modern Horizons 2. And an uncommon is not going to get a full border treatment or anything special. So in 3 months, not even 3 months, that set drops mid-June or late June, people are going to be playing this card and they're going to want the pimp version. So I think you're ahead of the curve.
For sure. And I think you're right. It's probably an uncommon, that set. But just think about this. If you're a gambler, right, you really want to take a risk here. What if? Ask yourself this. What happens to the price of that card if they print it as a rare or, heaven forbid, a mythic? You know what I mean? I don't think they will. I really don't think they will. But if they do, that card is going to be even more rare. It's going to be in Modern Horizons, but it's not going to be very common. People aren't going to be cracking it left and right. And if that happens, the version of Abundant Harvest that we just talked about is going to go through the roof. Like, that's going to be definitely the version to have. The rarity will be there. And I think, regardless, it is a good investment, but especially if you're a gambling man and that happens, you just hit the jackpot.
Yeah. Right on. You have listened to another episode of the SnapCast podcast. It's a little bit shorter than usual, but I've had a great time. We talked about some cool stuff. We had a lot of interaction with the chat, which we always appreciate.
Love it when you guys show up. I saw some messages from Sweet Phil. I was on my soapbox, but I just want to say appreciate you coming in and joining, brother. It was good to see you. Sweet Phil,
Brad Eaton, Tech 4. You guys are great.
Absolutely. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you get a notification when we go live. Come join us every week. Join the conversation and let us know what you think. Have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you soon. Peace.
Peace.